The Book of Eli, Jerry,
Yes.
opens this Friday.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first movie from the Hughes brothers in a while. I know they did since From Hell, feature film-wise, but they did a segment on New York, I Love You. Was that the name of it, New York, I Love You?
I think they did.
Yeah, they did a segment on that, which was one of those multi-director, multi-short films kind of compilations. And our guest tonight, Atticus Ross, worked with them on that, and has worked with them on several projects. But the Book of Eli actually marks his feature film composing debut, and his score is stunning. And we're going to close the show tonight with a 7-minute track of his score. You guys will be able to hear it. It's an incredible sounding score. Atticus actually, he kind of fell into film composition through the Hughes brothers. It wasn't something he necessarily considered in his music career thus far. He's been busy producing and performing and programming and engineering people like Pink and most notably Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, and he's formed a band called Error, and he works with a band called 12 Rounds. So that's the realm of music that he comes from. But I think he's a real fresh, exciting new voice in film composition. So I'm pleased to bring this interview to you. This is Atticus Ross talking about working with the Hughes brothers and the musical soundscape he composed for the Book of Eli. I'm a huge fan of film scores in general. Did you come from a appreciation of film scoring yourself?
Well, I've certainly always loved instrumental music, and and I've loved scores kind of, in the cinema. But it wasn't like I had a huge collection of scores. I had some, and then I certainly bought a lot more after I got the job, to try and figure out how it was done. But it's more, I think, just, the idea of instrumental music, and some of my favorite bands, Mogwai, for instance, is a very cinematic band, which are 90% instrumental.
Right. Even so, you're working, when you compose a film, you're working in the service of the directors, which I suppose is probably about the same as maybe when you produce a band, you're working in the service of their desires or their sound, what they want. What was the biggest learning curve when you took on film composition for you?
I mean, there's some similarities, but I do think it's a very, very different beast. I think what's similar is the idea of the communication aspect, of sitting with creative people. With a band it's different because they're musicians, obviously. In the Hughes brothers' case, they're very music-driven, and they're very musically aware. They're both very involved musically, but the one who kind of, they kind of divide up the workload on a movie, and Alan's more the overseer of the music. And he has an absolutely huge knowledge of music, and a huge knowledge of film music as well, and the role that music plays in film. I think what's unusual about them, speaking to friends of mine who actually do films more often, is that there's a part of the process at the beginning where you get together with them, and I've done a few different things with them now, and it's always been the same. With the Book of Eli, it was actually, they were more developed, if you like, but what I'm talking about is prior to cameras rolling, there's a lot of conversation, and in this case, they've done this really excellent lookbook thing, like those iBooks you can get made off iPhoto or whatever. And within it was pictures, a very kind of clear view of what the movie was going to look like, and these kind of a series of quotes from kind of these evocative quotes. And then I sort of sat down with Alan, and we went through that, and we went through various, films that he liked, or books, or anything really, that kind of captures, records or whatever, the kind of area that he's aiming for. And in this case, I think we wrote 12 pieces before they went off to shoot, because they like the actors to have some music, and kind of, they give everybody CDs and blah, 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 that kind of, just to try and capture the atmosphere of what's going. And the track that starts the score album, which is kind of the main theme, Panoramic, that was done before the picture was shot. And actually, at the end of the film, the picture's cut to the music rather than the other way around, if you know what I mean.
Wow. That is unique. and so it doesn't, if that was written in the pre-production phase, that main title, then as it turns out, what we hear in the finished film, thematically, it didn't change a whole lot.
No, I mean, that was the exception piece in terms of, that was like, this is, when they heard that, they were like, this is the sort of perfect, this is the world that we're going for, atmospherically. And obviously we go miles away from that with the orchestra or whatever, but
sure.
In terms of the actual instruments, but in terms of the mood, it's all, I know that some are, kind of more intense, this and that, but there's a certain world that I think it all lives in, and I think that the reason, to my ear, that it holds together as a score is to do with the mood. It allows us to go from, these very, there's a couple which are very synthetic sounding or noisy, Solara Violated or whatever, which is a part of a 3-series piece, to Purpose, which is, just the orchestra playing, on their own. There's no, it's the main string piece. And I think it's that mood that allows it not to sound like, a bunch of disparate elements that are just kind of stuck together.
So when you look at the photos, or when you talk to them about the themes and the setting and the feel of the film, how do these musical ideas start to come together? What themes do you latch on to, and what instruments and sounds do they produce for you?
Well, the first set of writing, like the first 12 pieces that we delivered, which I think there's probably aspects of 3 of them in the film. There's one thing where there's an advantage, because I think that me and Alan have a similar aesthetic. And I kind of know from the time that I've spent with him and the various things that we've done together that there's a kind of area that he's going to respond to, and then there's stuff that he probably wouldn't, and it's similar, the kind of thing that I like and the kind of thing that he likes. And in this particular film, they wanted a very textured, layered, kind of, evocative, and there is this thing, because it was quite tricky in a way that it isn't an action film, it isn't, only, it isn't like a dark film only, and it's not a kind of feel-good film only, but it lives in this kind of weird area. And there's a big part of the film is about this kind of spiritually evocative, you know what I mean? And trying to kind of get something and get the music that can, thread through all those different things, I mean, there is a darkness, and that's really summed up by Gary Oldman. And the the pieces that accompany him, this was something, you know, like you write some up front, and then as the picture starts coming in, you know, and the film starts to develop and the edit happens, you know, you switch from that broader thing into zeroing in on, like you said at the beginning, how best to serve this picture. You know, I mean, we are ultimately a cog in the machine. You know, and I think with the Hughes brothers, they allow that to be quite a big cog. But it's the kind of low horn pieces that you know, accompany Gary more.
Right. The soundscape that you've created for this movie is so unique and distinctive. And when you know where you can kind of characterize the film, I know characterizations are generally not fair and not quite accurate, but you know that you're dealing with a apocalyptic setting, religious themes. Are there sounds that you're trying to avoid? Was there a conversation about what they didn't want from the music?
Well, there was a couple of different things. I mean, one, that the acting, you know, you've got Denzel Washington and you've got Gary Oldman as the two kind of leads. So you've got this, you know, really high standard of acting, which allowed the music to be freer, because it wasn't like, you know, sometimes you see a film and it's like there's a scene and it's a sad scene and now there's some sad music playing, because I guess it's like, you know, we're all meant to feel sad at this point. You know what I mean? It's like the music's got to inform the scene. And that's not to say the music in this, you know, isn't carefully considered scene by scene, but if Gary's angry, you don't need a lot of angry music underneath him. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you can do it, and you can add to that, but maybe not in, you know, such a kind of traditional way. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And in terms of the actual, you know, I knew what I wanted to avoid. It's just that thing of where, you know, I think in the Book of Eli, the fact, you know, that it's post-apocalypse is just a setting. You know what I mean? It's not, in some films, it's, you know, of that nature. That's the kind of essence of the film.
Right.
But in this, I think the essence of the film is this journey, you know, this kind of physical journey that he takes, you know, the spiritual journey that he takes, and the sort of metaphorical journey that he takes. You know, the one thing that I knew, you know, there's been like a recent bunch of apocalypse films, and it seems like, you know, the apocalypse is going to sound like a really bad industrial band from 1992. Yeah. That's what I wanted to avoid. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you know, when you talk about the kind of soundscape aspect of that, I think, you know, we put a lot of time into trying, you know, who knows what it's going to sound like then. So it should feel unusual. You know what I mean? It should evoke a kind of new place, if you know what I mean. You know, so even, you know, I think that you know, quite a bit of the score is actually quite traditional, even though, you know, people have mentioned it being unusual. But certainly the orchestral side of things. But for me, it was always about the backdrop that you place that in. You know, it sounds unusual because of the setting that it's in. It's not like, you know, the orchestra has been made to sound weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, after we went to do that, it was so incredible. You know, I mean, particularly for the whole Abbey Road experience was so great. I didn't touch any of the stuff that we did there. I wanted it to sound very organic and very like those, brilliant players in that room. The kind of strangeness of it at times, I think, is just to do with the backdrop that it's set against, and that more than anything is the kind of that world of the future.
I was actually going to ask you about working in Abbey Road, because I would think for a musician that studio has to be hallowed ground in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually worked there before. Obviously I'm from England, but I'd never worked. Well, I'd never worked with an orchestra anyway. I'd done string sessions here and there, but never anything. Anything even approaching that. And everyone we had involved, because there is an aspect, like I've certainly done things in the past where you're really excited and you're going off somewhere special and, it's meant to be this great thing and, it turns into something that sucks. You know what I mean? Like there was an aspect of, I was happy with the music and I was thinking, is it going to be a disappointment or whatever? And it really was, one of the best musical experiences I've ever had, in terms of the quality, just the whole operation there, incredible conductor, really A-class players. The engineer was this guy called Jeff Forster, who, I think, I didn't know him before, but I think if you were a film person, you'd know him because he's always recording for Hans Zimmer or whatever, and just the smoothness and the kind of way it was done, and they're really, it was like incredible first take kind of stuff, brilliant orchestration by Dane and you. I mean, it really, I know I sound like I'm effervescing, but it really was good. This
interests me too. Going back to the unique working relationship you have with the Hughes brothers, you saying that the film kind of is cut around the music instead of vice versa to a large extent.
Well, not only in that one bit at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about I guess you'd call it the spotting sessions, deciding where the music should go, because what fascinates me is a big part of what you do, a big tricky part, is deciding where music should not go,
right,
just as much as where it should go.
Well, they had some ideas from the off that I think worked really well, which was, in the kind of action bits, generally the kind of action is the music, the sound of the guns, the kind of explosions or whatever, like we didn't ramp it up under there. There's bits and pieces, but, the whole spotting aspect of it is something that's, changing and developing as time goes, you know what I mean, and as the edit goes. In the original, what happened at the start was, like I said, we'd done some music up front, and then we broke, and they went off to shoot, and I was off doing something else, and then I came back, and I'd get emails, because Albert does a lot of, like, the kind of technical editing, and of course Cindy, who's the main editor in the thing, and Albert would say, hey, could you get me I need some X or Y, you know what I mean, like atmospheric stuff, or I need a piece that has some rhythm that I can cut to, and it's going to be with, but I hadn't really seen the picture at that stage, and then Cindy has a kind of library of, these early pieces, and they kind of get a feel for where the music should be, and some of the stuff, there might be the perfect piece, or there might be a piece that, is kind of in the right area, but that'll be a piece that, I see what they're trying to do, and then I'll rewrite to the picture or whatever, and as time went on, different things would come up, because Denzel's character, in a sense, was easier to write for because he spends a lot of time kind of, he's a man of few words. So
right.
he's walking, and I knew very much about his character, you know what I mean, and what we were trying to evoke with him. The one that was harder was Gary, because he's talking all the time, and he's saying great stuff, so you don't ever want to get in the way of him, but at the same time, he needed something there needed to be a musical contrast between the two. And it was Alan that came up with this idea of the horns, which, you don't hear that much anymore, or maybe I've zoned out to, but I, love the sound of horns. And, and that was one of the kind of, really challenging and fun bits of doing it.
When you're watching the movie, I know that you've watched it, probably seen it many, many times in the process of scoring it, but when you watch it the screening, or the last time you watched it, as a composer and as someone that's so intricately involved in the actual process of putting it together, are you able to remove yourself from that process and enjoy the film?
It's funny because they had the premiere the other night, which I went to, and I did the score with my wife and my brother. He's away, but me and my wife went, and it was the first time that I was able to sit back and just enjoy the film, without zoning in on, oh God, that sounds terrible, whatever.
Right.
And also, it was the first time I'd ever seen it with finished picture, because all the time you work on the dub stage, for some unknown reason, apparently it's some kind of film tradition that you always have kind of not very good-looking picture there. And particularly in this film, where the look of it, that's a character, that's one of the movie characters, if you like. So to sort of see it, and also to see it with a bunch of people who, to be in a big room with people who hadn't seen it a lot. And the other thing that was exciting about that whenever it was, a couple of nights ago, was I score the movie as best I see it, or we score the movie. But when it goes to the dub stage, Alan Hughes does another layer, if you like, of musical production. And often, I might deliver a cue in the way that I see it, and then he might change it in there in terms of, he has a set of 12 stems or whatever it is that make up the cue. He might choose, let's take that one out and drop the drums there and, ramp it up here, or whatever it is. And he's really excellent at that, I've got to say. And there were certain bits that happened right at the very end, the last couple of days, or even on that very last day, and I wasn't there. So it was kind of like, wow, I've never seen that before, and it actually sounds really good. And I did watch it, and kind of, when I was heading in there, obviously I was nervous, and I thought, everyone's going to see through, and it's going to sound so, I don't know what the right word is, but unprofessional or something. But actually, I watched it and I didn't feel embarrassed, and I thought it came across really good. And we had another guy, Chris Jenkins, who was the guy who mixed it, and he's like an Oscar-winning guy. You know what I mean? I think he's head of sound at Universal or whatever. And for some reason, he took a real interest in the score, and from early on, he saw a rough edit very early on, and sort of went out of his way. I think, he'd come down the studio, he'd open up the sound stage to us, and just go way beyond what would be the normal Call of Duty, to make it something special, I think. And that was another real, really, really important part of getting it right with the picture.
is this something that that you want to definitely do more of? And if so, is there a dream genre that you'd love to compose for?
I don't think I'd be good at romantic comedy.
Right. Those probably are the hardest to compose too.
Probably. But I would love to do another film. I really had a great, really enjoyed the whole process of this one. Was fantastic, and I think part of it was that made it so good was having all these people. Like everyone on this project was very focused on what it was going to be, and whether it's a big box office success or not, it would still be a great success to me. You know what I mean? I feel really proud of the music, and I think the film is really good. And like I say, the experience, I couldn't have asked for anything better than that. And I think that more than anything, that's built on the people that are involved, And this went right across, to the producers on this, and I'm not just saying this because, you're meant to. It was like they had a sort of confidence in it where there wasn't that kind of micromanaging aspect.
Right.
I think I know I only got one note from the producers, which was, "Hey, we really like the music, keep going," And much as this is good, I could see how a different situation could not be good. You know what I mean? And I actually got called in, and it will go unnamed, over Christmas to possibly do a couple of scenes in a film that, was a big film, but lots of chaos around it, and I didn't do it. And I would love to do another film. I would really like it to be to step into some kind of similar world in terms of a clear picture of what the film was, and hopefully I think having done one now, and also I think I learned an incredible amount. I'm sure there were things even through this process that I might approach differently, given the same set of circumstances again in terms of musically. But I think it kind of gives enough of a picture of what I might be able to bring to the project, and hopefully it would be a project, who might, who would want that specifically that might come to me, and at the same time, if I don't get to do another one, that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like, this was great.
Yeah, it sounds like an ideal experience. Like you've really been kind of spoiled by the experience of doing this. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really lucky in the sense that I have a career doing records, so it's not like I have to do whatever next comes along. I mean, unless that work runs out as well. It's touch wood. But I think it's in all things in life, particularly in kind of the artistic side, it's you serve yourself well by kind of waiting for the right thing and making the choices based more off that, than the artistic side of things. Because to be able to, you say you enjoy the score and stuff, to deliver something that you can enjoy, you need all those other things in place.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? One needs to have an aspect of that, musical freedom and the belief from the directors and the producers involved, that you can do it.